Hello everyone, this is JPL, and welcome back to Podcast Name in Brackets. Yes, today we're going to be celebrating a very special podcast episode. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for supporting us. This has been a long time coming. I've never thought that we'd actually make it to this point. For those who don't know, today we are celebrating almost 6 years of doing the podcast. And very importantly, 100 episodes. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? 100 episodes? Oh man, I can barely believe it. What did we do for 100 episodes? What did we talk about? That just seems like way too many episodes to have. But anyway, I remember way back when I first started doing this podcast, and whenever I started uploading the episodes on YouTube originally, I labeled the episodes differently than you can see on Anchor or on the other websites that you listen to this to. But on YouTube, I label them, the podcast name, yada yada. Then I have the episode number. Instead of just saying episode this, I did just the numbers. And I did 001 for my first episode. And that's the way I've been labeling them ever since. 0050, 0075. But today, we're finally into triple digits. So no longer will the YouTube uploads be labeled as 0 something. Now it will be 100 and something. And that just blows my mind. Because back when I first started, I didn't think I would ever get to this point. I had thought that it would be cool and exciting to get the triple digits, but I didn't think it was going to be possible. I mean, I thought that the podcast would end years ago. But we kept going. And it's thanks to my friends like Matthew, ToaLegend, Christopher. And it's also thanks to you guys listening that helps us keep going and just knowing that 2 or 3 people, maybe 5 people actually listen to our podcast. And it's amazing. It really is. And so I want to say once again, thank you. Thank you so much for all this. It's wonderful. We're going to have an exciting time this episode. It's going to be fun. And we've done some good work in this one. So, what can you expect for this episode of the podcast? Well, I did my best to bring back almost everyone who has been part of this podcast. I interviewed them, and they talked about their experience on the podcast, and just some small tidbits about our history. Now, I wasn't able to bring back everyone to return to this podcast. This happens in life, people move on, they're busy, just things happening in scheduling that just causes things to be delayed, or maybe they weren't able to come at a time. Happens all the time. For this podcast specifically, we're missing a couple people, but we have most people in this podcast. Also wanted you to keep in mind that this podcast was originally intended for the 5-year anniversary, but had to be delayed because a lot of people weren't able to record an interview by the time the 5-year podcast came to be. And so that's why this podcast has been delayed and pushed for 100 episodes, which for me is a much more exciting time than just celebrating 5 years. So because of that, some of the information, the dates, and the timing that are expressed in this some interviews may not be correct, because at one point I did say that we were at 70 episodes, but now we're at 100. So yeah, once again, thank you guys for listening all these years, and let's get started. On to you, John.
Thank you, John. All right, so here I am with Christopher. We're what's really much to say or interview about because we've had so many conversations.
We do, and you never say anything, and then I don't know what to say. So that's...
Yes. So for this interview, all this information we know, like we've talked about it so many times in our podcast. Yeah, Christopher. If you guys don't know, I don't know why you wouldn't, but yeah, if you don't know, Christopher is like my secondary host. Half, if not most, of the podcast episodes are with this guy here. So yeah, why don't we just talk about how were you introduced to this podcast?
You've probably mentioned it like a handful of times. Freaking long and canceled podcast or something.
Council podcast name in brackets.
Okay, yeah. And so like you've mentioned it, and it never really like registered or anything. And then you one day is like pretty much just like, let's record a podcast. I'm like, fine. But it just became the way that we were able to kind of like hang out consistently. So, which is pretty cool. The thing is, John like never talks outside a podcast. Almost never. But so to be able to actually talk with him is actually cool.
Neat. So, before I introduced you to the podcast, you weren't really aware of the podcast, or you don't really remember the podcast. Me ever bringing it up?
I think you've like mentioned it, but I never listened.
Okay.
I still don't.
Okay.
But yeah, it just never really was like a thing for me.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it existed.
Mm-hmm.
You might have mentioned it, but the thing is, you mentioned a lot of things that you do.
Yeah.
So it's hard to keep track sometimes.
I do like to show you my stuff.
Yeah, and then I like falling asleep at his stuff.
Right. So I should have started with this question, but who are you, Christopher?
Oh my gosh, I wish I knew. No, I go online as Christopher164. I have a YouTube channel where I've been doing music reactions for a while. I don't know. I'm still like, I want to be able to do more, but it's like trying to figure things out. I've kind of taken somewhat hiatus in 2020 due to personal things and YouTube things. But in the end, like, I am a content creator. I'm currently in college, going to be graduating in the summer, which is crazy. So yeah, what am I doing? I don't know. It's like, we'll see what God has planned. And that's kind of like the position where I'm kind of at, where it's, yeah, again, like, I just don't know. I kind of just have to stay open, but at the same time, like, I know what I love. I love music. I love making videos, but it's like timing. Sometimes that gets in the way, but that's a little bit about me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did we meet?
It was the day before classes. Freshman year. I don't know how I heard, but I heard that there were auditions at Liberty for theater things, and also there was a audition for the audio drama that the school has. And so I went and auditioned for like all of them, including technical thing, which obviously Caleb got easily. But you were there, and so that's how I met you. There was also another guy, Jonathan. Do you remember him? He's a cine major. I've seen him around a little bit this semester. I forget what he... no, I think he also auditioned for the audio drama. I don't think he did for the theater. I think also CJ auditioned for theater.
Yeah, CJ was there. I remember him being there.
Yeah, so... Yeah, that's... I don't remember that's how I met CJ, but I know that's how I met John. That much I do know.
Yes. Do you remember your first impression of me?
Not really. I'll be honest, I really don't, because, like, I know, like, I think it was Jonathan, he was, like, showing some of his stuff. I don't know if you were.
I implied some of my stuff, but I couldn't actually show you anything.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you didn't, like, have a computer or anything, so... yeah, I guess, like, Jonathan was, like, showing his things, and then kind of, like, with you now, I was probably, like, getting tired halfway through.
Gotcha.
I don't know, it's just, like, sometimes, like, I need breaks sometimes, or I want to take a nap. But no, he's a good guy. and so is John. But you know, sometimes like it's just like, okay, John, I love you, but can I take a nap? But I don't really remember like first impressions. I know I will say like overall, like maybe the first or second semester or year, like we weren't like super close, and like I was still like trying to like find my way at Liberty, just like trying to see like how I belonged in things. So like I was kind of like in limbo with like a lot of friendships, and so I was just like, I don't know like how to be a good friend. I don't know who are my good friends and such. But John was pretty constant in my life though, and so I think it was kind of the podcast that kind of brought us closer together.
Yeah, I know that after we first met, like I recognized you very well, but I know that you just had a hard time just trying to remember me.
Really?
Yeah, like for the first few encounters, you were like, what was your name again? It's like, who are you again?
I guess that is me. With every person.
It's like, because like we didn't really see each other all the time. Like
True.
I'd see you like once every few weeks, just bumping into you.
Yeah.
In the hallway. I remember that first year I'd spot you all the time during convo, because like you would because you would wear flannel, and you would.
I still wear flannel.
But you would wear flannel. That's specifically where I remember you back then, was the flannel all the time, and during worship I just see you dancing your moves, and so I'd scone the entire stadium, just watch for flannel and dancing, and as soon as I see that, I knew it was you, and like I'd spot you.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like all the way across the stadium. It's like, there he is, and like I do that very quickly, which is fun.
I remember, like sometimes I would try to like find people, because you know it's the crazy thing, like at Convo, like everyone at the school is there basically. So sometimes I'd be like, all right, I wonder if I'd see someone, and then I would like give up after like 2 seconds, like nah, there are too many people. But the fact that you were actually able to, like, that's crazy. Were you able to spot anybody else, or just me?
It was just you. It was just you.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but you know, it's fun. Yeah, we didn't really hang out that much.
No, I would say it beat the podcast, because I mean, I know you invited me.
Like before the podcast, we didn't really hang out.
No, you invited me to your house once with CJ.
Once with CJ. There was the Edge.
Yeah, we used to see each other at the Edge.
Yeah, not that much.
That was for like, but even like before the podcast, though.
Yeah, that was before the podcast.
That was kind of fun, though.
That was kind of fun. I know that I went to church one week for the first time at that place, and you were there.
What do you mean, that place?
Sorry, at Calvary Chapel.
Oh, you made it sound like it was a different place.
Sorry, yeah. When I went to Calvary Chapel for the first time, and you were there.
I don't remember when you went there first time, but
it was like a summer. And like,
was it during the summer?
It was during the summer. We were looking around different churches.
Oh, wait, no, I remember.
Yeah.
You were there with your parents.
With my parents, and you were there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, hey, it's Christopher. That's neat. But then, of course, you didn't go to the same
service
every time.
Somehow I was at that one. Probably I was doing the projector.
You weren't.
I wasn't?
You were not.
Oh, I have no idea
why. It was before your duties as a projectionist.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Because
I saw you in the audience, not actually in the projector.
Okay, but it's not like I did the projector every week, though.
No. But
so I probably was doing whatever.
You weren't there.
I wasn't up there doing projector that day.
No, but you know, you were there, and that's partly the reason why I stayed at the church.
But you haven't gone recently?
I mean, not in the past couple weeks. I've been watching online.
Oh, you've been watching online?
Yeah, but no.
I'll be honest, I actually haven't watched even online or gone in person. So, I don't know if you heard. Probably should have saved this for our finale podcast, but me and CJ got in an accident on Sunday. Danny drove us, and something happened. Thankfully, it was minor. Praise God.
I mean...
But, yeah, and then the other 2 times, one day I slept in, the other day we didn't have a ride.
This is not relevant, because...
This is really not relevant.
It's not relevant.
Gosh, I sound like a terrible Christian.
This is coming out in January, or maybe February.
Yeah, this is so not relevant.
Let's move on to the interview.
Okay.
So yeah, like, my first impressions of you
Oh, you have first impressions.
I do have first impressions.
Oh no.
Of you. I liked you very early on.
Aww.
That's for sure. Like when I was first talking, he was like, yeah, he seems like the type of guy that I could be really good friends with. Maybe even do videos with. Like even back then, I was thinking, it's like, yeah, he seems like the type of guy that I could just do something like the podcast with, maybe. And so yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like just very really early on, I had that thought of you and I doing this kind of thing together, which is it's neat.
What made you want to do the podcast specifically, though?
That's for a different interview.
What?
That's for a different interview. That's coming later in this interview podcast, people. Sorry, I'll tell you after this interview here.
Okay.
So yeah, well, what would you say are your favorite memories in this podcast?
The one that sticks out like a sore thumb is the one time I kind of fell asleep in the middle of the podcast, and you were so disappointed in me.
Yes, and you don't even remember like some of that, like
I was like, so because like I stayed up so late. It's so funny because like sometimes I think like, okay, I need to get to sleep because of podcasts, and then I don't, and then the next day I'm so tired. And then I give off a terrible performance during the podcast. And that one, like, I had my pillow. My pillow is like, I laid down on the pillow and you're talking.
It's like, as soon as I saw you lay down on the pillow, I'm like, oh no, that's not good.
And then I actually was not paying attention, period.
and
then I probably asked you to repeat it again. Or I
like,
said...
I said, like, so, did you hear me? It's like, what? No, I wasn't
listening.
Oh,
yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, I literally could not remember anything. I felt so bad, and you were so disappointed.
I was just so bummed out that I decided, like, all right, the podcast's got to end here.
Yeah, you.
Like, I just had to end the podcast, just like, because I was just so invested in, like, the thing I was so invested in, and, like, you weren't able to listen to it. It's like, you know what? Just end it here, because I was so bummed out.
It's so funny, but so sad at the same time.
Right. Besides that, any other... favorite episode or favorite memory from the podcast?
Honestly, no, because it just all blends together. You know what I mean? We just come on here, we don't plan anything.
No.
We talk about stupid crap, and then we end it, and like there are times when we have fun. There are times when we bore ourselves.
We do all the time. We bore ourselves so many times before the next conversation.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but it's just fun to do because this is something I do consistently. This is something I do to get to know a friend better. And it is fun doing the podcast, even though this is like the worst podcast in existence.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Yes. Yeah, so that leads...
Because we just don't put enough effort into it.
So that leads to my next question.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on podcasts in general?
In general, I think it's a great medium. I used to be really into them. And, like, honestly, like, this is a listenable podcast. You just, like, have to, like, really just appreciate our personalities. Anyways, but, like, that's one thing about podcast personalities that you have to get used to.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't like personality, then you're not going to enjoy the podcast. That's part of it. But podcasts in general, I think, are a really awesome medium. Like I said, I used to be into them a lot. I think that was before I was, like, really into music, and that was when I was, like, listening to Adventures Odyssey more. But I don't really make time for them. That's my thing, because I'm just so busy in doing things, and so I like have to be very intentional if I ever want to listen to a podcast episode. I don't follow any podcasts. Like I may like on Spotify like follow podcasts and see whenever they release new things, but I never actually like, all right, I'm gonna listen to every single new episode it releases because I just don't have time for that. So it's a great medium. But again, the weird thing is I'm, like, so removed from it. Like, I definitely don't have anything negative toward podcasts, but I just, like, don't have a lot of emotions towards podcasts in general.
Yeah.
If you kind of know what I mean?
Gotcha.
I wish I was a little more involved to, like, see, like, because I want to do my own podcast one day. I've mentioned that before.
Okay.
But I would feel like I would want to know, like, what's going on more in the podcast world to be able to do a podcast properly. I think it's a great medium, and it's a great way to, like, interview people, I think, because I don't feel like there's as much effort when it comes to an audio podcast interview compared to, like, a YouTube video interview. So, yeah, I want to do podcast interviews one day. I think that'd be really cool. So it's a great medium that I'm just unfortunately not as intentional about these days.
So, do you have any regrets about this podcast?
Maybe the potential crap that maybe somebody would find and then get it trending on Twitter and cancel me. That's pretty much it.
Sure, I get you. Would you be interested in coming back to the podcast?
Oh, heckin' yeah. Heckin' yeah. It's fun to do. Again, like I said, something consistent that we do together.
Mm-hmm.
And we have fun doing it, even if we don't plan, or some days we just hate ourselves for doing it.
Do we hate ourselves?
Maybe. But, yeah, I love doing it. So
Nice. And so, what would you like to do in the future with this podcast?
I wish we could plan better. But the thing is, I never take time to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have that time.
We've tried so many times to plan something.
Sometimes you do have some interesting questions.
Because it's like, there are times where it's like, okay, let's plan this week, and I write it down on a stick of notes.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really done that recently.
You haven't.
But sometimes, I do that, and it works.
It does.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't.
I know that we tried interviewing people, bringing other people into this podcast.
Yeah, those were interesting, but that's only only what you could do during a quarantine period.
Sure, yeah.
Which worked for what we had to do.
What we had to do,
but it could have gone better.
It definitely could have gone better.
For understandable reasons.
Yeah.
I still loved it when I had my friend on, my friend Chris.
Oh my gosh!
But you were still out of it, bro.
Why? I don't know. I think I was just really tired or something.
Okay, so that was different for a change. But yeah, no, that actually was a fun podcast for me.
I think I might have also had a headache or something.
Why didn't you say anything?
It wasn't really strong enough to really point it out. But it was
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not really. Yeah, but you know what? It was an experiment. We tried it out. It was different. So,
which do you think went better, when your friend was on or when my friend was on? Or you don't remember?
I mean, I like to say my friend
because you knew your friend better.
Not so much, but because we had softer subjects. Because that
no, wait, but that was the explicit episode.
That was the explicit episode where I was
God.
just reading some of my work. With your friend, the thing is, we brought up really
controversial,
semi-controversial topics.
Yeah.
Which I'm not really into.
Yeah, John, you need to grow up.
No, the world needs to grow up. I'm the mature one.
Okay. You need to learn how to talk more, though. In real life.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
Anyway, thank you for being here, Christopher.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, it's nice having you here. So yeah, back to you, John. Thank you, John. Okay, so yeah, I'm here with my good friend Dwight.
What is up, everybody?
Yes, we're here for another interview. Dwight's here. So yeah, Dwight, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
So I met John through school, and yeah, I've done some reaction videos with him. I've done some podcasts in the past. We've watched a lot of various pop culture shows. Personally, I'm interested in YouTube and being creative and getting my work out there. I'm interested in theater, interested in Star Wars and all those other good things. Currently married, working at Wendy's because the pandemic won't allow me to get a job where I want to get a job, but anything else I should say?
Yeah, tell us more about your YouTube channel. What do you do there?
Sure. So it's been a little inconsistent recently because after I left school, my Adobe product license has been suspended right now, and we're going to
Oh.
try and get it renewed so that I can continue. But my probably my most proud project is an animated series called My Dwight Tonight. Um, I've animated it myself, made all the resources, did all the writing, um, got some friends to voice some characters. I'm currently about a third of the way through the planned episodes, but I need Adobe products before I can continue animating.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, what I've been releasing on YouTube is time lapses of digital art projects that I've been working on. Either doing some, I guess you could call it a spider sona of Spider-Man as a cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing friends of mine and family as superheroes. I'm just trying to develop my artistic skill, get better at using digital art media, um, and then showing the process on YouTube so you guys can see what goes into it. That's about what I'm doing right now. I've got a lot of like parody songs and things like that in the works, but nothing like coming up soon. But
Yes, and you can check those stuff on the YouTube channel Johnimation.
Johnimation Studios.
Yes. Over in the description below, or if you're on Anchor, find the YouTube channel yourself. Um, so yes, you briefly touched up upon this, but how did we meet? Is a good question.
I'm trying to remember the first time,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was we were both working on a show. Backstage,
Yeah,
was it Bye Bye Birdie?
yeah, it was Bye Bye Birdie. I know that
Right.
that was a big one, but we were also in the same class together for acting too.
Right. We got to do some scene work together. We
For
did
our final
from The
scene.
Odd Couple.
Yeah.
We actually got a really good grade on that, and my best scene grade of the class, working with John. And we decided to like switch things up, like expectation wise, and like cast ourselves in the roles that maybe wouldn't necessarily we would be cast in otherwise. But
Yeah.
I thought it made it for a really fun time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some good scene work. John was a good partner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely acting two is really where we connected the most. I think Bye Bye Birdie is probably where I mainly started remembering you
Hmm.
or started recognizing you as someone familiar.
Right.
I know that back then you were working on your Sword of the Rings animation,
Oh yes.
which was fun to see you work on that, and to see your work backstage during that show. But yeah, mainly at theater. And after that, we just. What did we do after that?
Well, we would continue to see each other around school in the theater
Oh,
hallway,
in the commuter lounge.
in the
Yeah.
computer lounge. And you invited me to come over and do some reactions with you.
Yeah.
Um, Starting with, was it Ruby?
Yeah, it was Ruby.
Yeah. So that's the first time I was over at your place.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, I think year and a half after that,
It's about a year, yeah.
yeah, my living situation fell through really fast towards the end of the semester, and I had been planning to stay in the apartment I was in, but one of my roommates got denied, and then my other one pulled out. So would have been just me trying to pay for the apartment over the summer and having to find more roommates, or also bailing on it, packing up everything, and having to find somewhere new to live the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you offered you're a spare room where you live,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like it was an opportunity that like it was something I could afford, and it was like with like obviously somebody I knew that I would get along with. So then we became roommates for it was almost 2 semesters. With the COVID outbreak, we ended up
semester and 2/3.
yeah, the end of the semester cut short online. I moved back home, but we had a good time.
Yeah,
that school year.
fun stuff. Like, we did a lot of videos.
Yeah.
Like, not just reacting to videos, but also just watching videos together for fun.
Yeah. Watched through a lot of Doctor Who.
Oh yeah.
So all of New Who up to I don't think
10.
I don't think we watched the Capaldi's last specials together, but we watched.
We didn't really watch season 10 together.
Okay, that's right. I did continue watching that. Very much enjoyed that last season.
Mm-hmm.
Started watching a little bit of Jodie Whittaker, but was occupied by other things such as wedding planning, and I haven't really gotten back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not quite as captivating these first few episodes, but
you know, fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miss those times. It's strange not be able to just bother you all the time. But you know, it's fun. So yeah. So where did you first hear about this podcast?
This podcast, I think we were just hanging out, watching something together. Then you decided to show me some of your old projects, either on YouTube or you talked about starting it, and I think you showed me some of the first podcast where you were still hadn't decided upon a name, and so we're like, we'll just call it podcast name in brackets.
Yes.
On the
we
paper
told you
here.
about the origins of the show.
Yeah. I thought that was funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when I first heard about it.
Okay.
I don't think I was on the podcast for a while after that.
No. I do believe that I had asked you if you would be interested to do a podcast about Solo when that came out. But, you know, we just kept having to delay the podcast.
That's right.
And eventually we just never did that podcast.
I mean, I still got opinions, but
you
don't know how relevant they are.
You shared them when we did The Rise of Skywalker. That's for sure.
Did I?
I think you did.
Oh, my opinions on The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, not just Rise of Skywalker, but also Solo, maybe.
I do remember we did a long talk that wasn't supposed to be about the other Star Wars movies, but I ended up bringing them up.
You did.
Yeah. I just had a lot to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What were your thoughts about podcasts beforehand? Like, did you listen to any podcasts?
I don't think I ever had. I'm more of a either YouTube or like TV show binger. So I hadn't really gotten into any podcasts. I still haven't really, but I've definitely enjoyed being a part of them and just getting to talk, share my opinions on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is definitely very interested in podcasts. She's into true crime podcasts right now, learning about like real stories that have happened, and currently one about a court case that they think the wrong person got convicted, and so they're digging up old evidence on it. So
interesting.
Yeah. Apparently, she listened to. She spent like a total amount of time, 12 days, listening to podcasts in this last year.
Yikes!
So yeah,
it's a lot of hours.
Yeah, she's a little more podcasty than me in general, but
right. Yeah. Do you remember when your first appearance on the podcast was?
It might have just been one day when you couldn't have Chris on. You needed someone else to talk with, and I was in the hallway and I had free time. And so we just went to the collab space and did it, I think.
I believe that was the second time.
Oh,
Because the first time was actually the first podcast that I did with my new system with Christopher.
oh,
Me and Christopher were recording already, but then we just saw you walk by, and we called out to you. So like, hey, come over here. And so you just joined
oh,
us for
that's
the rest of the
right.
podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
Yeah. Back when we still did it like that. Yeah, since then you've been on a couple podcasts.
Yeah.
Like The Rise of Skywalker.
Uh-huh.
And even just podcasts with just the two of us. When we couldn't do Christopher.
Right. I know we've talked about several different movies or series or narrative structure.
Mm-hmm.
Some good talks.
And so, what would you say are your favorite memories from this podcast?
I think probably just time I would have otherwise just spent, I don't know, working on studying or something like that. Just having this opportunity out of the blue to instead have a conversation with friends, um, share my opinions, listen to others. Yeah, probably sitting in the collab spaces, despite how like maybe unprofessional of a environment it was still like it was relaxed, you know? We could just kind of
Yeah.
talk about anything.
Mm-hmm. Nice, fun stuff. Yeah, and so, if you were given the opportunity to return to the podcast for some episode, would you do so?
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed.
All right. And so, final question. So, what's next for you in terms of maybe life or just your plans for the future of your channel?
Well, we're about to move. We're involved in both worship leading and youth group at a church, so we're moving closer there, and Janae's job is there too. But we once we're settled, and maybe once I find a better job that's not just like minimum wage, I will try to reinstate my Adobe product license and finish animating Dwight. I've got some other, maybe not series, but like shorts that I'd like to animate at some point. I'm gonna see if they like some I may not have to do in with Adobe products. I'm trying to find other animating systems, maybe something cheaper. But I think the way Dwight has been done, I can only really do that with the Adobe product. So, but I'll continue writing comedy sketches, hopefully animating, definitely continue my art. At the moment, that's the future I envision. I don't know. Don't really have like a long-term plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So, that's good. So, yeah, Dwight, do you have any final thoughts you want to give off here?
Listen to your mom. Eat your veggies. As I like need to remind you those things. Make good choices. Thanks for asking me to come talk today.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've caught up, and like obviously not living in the same state anymore. Don't get to interact quite as much, but
No.
it's a good chance to catch up, and
Yeah.
I'm glad to be a part of this.
All right. So, yeah, thank you for coming, Dwight. And thank
No
you for
problem.
spending this time for this 5-year anniversary. So, yeah, thank you for coming. And, yeah, back to you, John. Thank you, John. All right. So, I'm here with CJ Ward. How are you doing, CJ?
Doing pretty good. Pretty good. A little stressed, a little tired, but we're doing good.
Oh, isn't that the natural way of life? So,
Yeah.
anyways, CJ, welcome back to this little podcast section here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been on a couple episodes with me and Christopher.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Oh boy. I'll try to be more condensed this time than I was the first time I came on.
That's all right. That's all
um,
right.
but my name is CJ Ward. I just graduated with a degree in theater, and I'm now teaching elementary drama, which seems like it would be a contradiction in terms, but is a viable option. Teaching elementary drama at my church's school back home, um, which is an adventure and a headache and a half all in the same time. But that's what I'm doing right now. How much do you want to know?
You can do whatever you would like.
Oh boy, give me free reign here. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
So just I guess flyover of who I am. Um, Born in Baltimore, Maryland, raised in Central Florida. Christian since I was 5. Let's see. Same school from second grade to graduation. Went to Liberty with John, and did how many shows did I do at Liberty? 12? I think I did 12. Got into theater because of my junior high and high school drama teacher, who was just one of the godliest women I've ever known, and really just inspired my love for performing. Drama gave me a place to fit in as a non-athletic goofball. Drama was my place to fit in, and my place to just fully express myself. And she gave me a love for it. And she it's been, I think, 4 years now since she passed away. So I'm still striving to honor her through everything that I do from here on out. And um, still looking for ways to audition and keep acting myself. There's a small, like, 100-seat black box theater about 15 minutes from where I live, that I've done a couple of auditions for now. One for Barefoot in the Park, one for Murder on the Orient Express. Haven't gotten cast yet, but truthfully, I think that's because, like, there's a number of roles that would be really good for me in these shows. Problem is, I'm like one of the youngest actors in the bunch, like by
Yeah.
a really wide margin. So it's more than just like finding the right role for me. It's getting me to gel with the rest of the cast. So hopefully soon I'll get cast in something, because I really miss performing. But teaching is taking up most of my time, because teaching drama to kindergartners through fourth graders is nuts. So, but I'm having fun. And yeah, just looking to glorify Jesus in everything, and that's pretty much me.
Oh, yes, it is. If you haven't met him, that's exactly him.
I think the only things I left out were NASCAR and Doctor Who, so that's pretty much it.
Of course, of course. Do you remember how we first met?
Oh goodness. It was either church or some kind of theater thing. I don't remember which one.
Mm-hmm.
You probably remember better than I do. I don't have a good memory with things like that.
Okay. Well, it was the day before the first day of classes.
Okay.
This was the first auditions for the semester. First auditions ever.
Yeah.
It was the Sunday.
Yeah.
We were in the auditions group together as freshmen, as guys. I remember that
Yeah, that first one in the alumni ballroom, right?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Oh man! Wow. Yeah.
I remember the music that we had for that.
Yep.
A lady is a tramp. I also remember what your monologue was. It was Juror 3 from
Yep.
12 Angry Men.
Yes, it
And
was.
of course, that caught my attention because it's like I played the same character in high
Yep.
school. I knew that monologue and I knew what you were doing.
Yeah.
And plus, you were wearing a bow tie, same as me.
Yep.
And it was like, hey, this guy's nifty. We have like stuff in common. And so, right after the auditions, as we were walking out the building, I went up to you and say like, hey, like nice audition. I know that play. It's like, oh yeah, really, yeah. And so we chatted for like a couple seconds, and then we
Yeah.
said goodbyes. After that, I don't know. We bump each other into hallways. I'd see you in the plays that you did. We had a couple classes together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was our first meeting through
Wow.
theater in the department.
There's a throwback.
Oh yes, that throwback back when we were young, naive, and less humbled.
Yeah. Yes. Amen to that.
Yes. And so do you recall how you were approached to be a part of this podcast?
Let's see.
Or when you first heard of this podcast?
Yeah, I had known for a while that you and Christopher were doing something, and I want to say you just asked me to do it one time because he couldn't make it or something like that. You asked me to jump on, just to talk about the balance between faith and theater and what all that looks like. And I don't remember like how the specific conversation went down, but I remember those were the circumstances around it. But yeah, I'd known that you two were doing this for a long time before you asked me to jump in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was something like that. I don't know if it was a situation where Christopher couldn't come. It probably was, but it was what that means in theater. Because hello,
Yeah, I lost you there for a second.
what was the last thing I said?
You had just said I don't know if it was because Christopher couldn't make it.
Okay.
You
I
said,
don't know if it was I don't know if it was whether Christopher couldn't make it or not, but all I remembered, like the main thing I remembered was the night, like a few days before, I just had this big inspiration to just talk about faith and how like it affects our art form, our theater, because it is an important question, like because
yeah,
we don't really talk a lot about this at all. A lot of people don't talk about this, especially in the big cities like LA or even
yeah,
New York, and you just see a lot of people just doing it because that's what they have to do to succeed.
yeah,
And I just really want to talk about like how do we draw the line? How do we do this? And so we had this podcast. We talked about it. We shared our stories and how we would do things. And then you later came on for just a normal conversation podcast with Christopher.
mm-hmm.
I don't know what the heck we talked about that day.
I remember. I distinctly remember the episode title. It was called "I Have Some Neosporin."
Oh yes, oh yes. Uh,
We talked about a whole bunch of different things. It was just sort of whatever came to mind.
yes,
Not
and
really any.
that was exactly it. I just turned to my shelf and there was just Neosporin right there. Yeah, I think at that point Christopher had left the call or something had happened, and so we were just stalling for time.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that, what would you say are your favorite memories of being on the podcast or of our friendship in general?
Oh boy. With I do have one particular memory that just jumps out from the podcast. It's from my first time on, and I don't even remember like how in the conversation it came up, but we were talking about we were talking about just like Christian entertainment and stuff that we grew up watching, and I casually mentioned Hermie and Wormy, and we both just like freaked out reminiscing about Hermie and Wormy. I distinctly remember that. I distinctly remember that. And just I mean, just in terms of our friendship, I mean, we've nerded out together a few times, more than a few times. And it was always nice to have somebody to talk Doctor Who with and rant about that or celebrate that or anything like that. And obviously we would see each other at church all the time, which was also always really nice to have a connection there. And yeah, just a lot of fun. I think probably one of my favorite memories is the time that Christopher and I came over to your house and just hung for a while. Was that I don't remember the occasion. I feel like it was some holiday, but I don't remember.
It was like a end of the year get together.
Yeah, that was so much fun. That was so much fun, and I remember just like chilling in your kitchen eating, cheese rolls or whatever it was that you had made, and it was fun. It was fun. So I don't have a good like detailed memory of most things, but there's been a lot of fun times that we've had.
Speaking of Doctor Who,
Okay,
Russell T.
Oh my gosh, talk about unexpected, but hello.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'm cautiously optimistic because there's a lot of concern that he could just try to duplicate what he did before. But I mean, I think if anybody can right the ship, he can. And I'm hoping that he's able to bring some new energy to it, bring it back to just like quality storytelling, and just make it fun. That's one of my biggest complaints about the current era is like not only the political aspect of it, but it's just not fun anymore. Because there's so many different things, so many different aggravating things happening. The Davies era was just plain fun more often than not. So I'm hoping we can go back to that. I'm confident in his abilities. I want to make sure that he's not out of ideas.
Yeah. I wonder, like, if he does come back, who else could come back?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it is going to be interesting, the fact that his first one is going to be the 60th anniversary. Like, does he try to use that to introduce somebody new, or does Whittaker stick around, or do we get only former doctors? Like, what happens in that special?
Is that 2 years from now?
It'll be in 23. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's so soon.
I know. And of course, Series 13 is getting ready to air this month on Halloween.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Halloween is the air date of that. I'll watch it. I'm intrigued by the concept of it this time around. It's a shorter season. It's either 8 or 10 episodes, but it's so. Are you at all familiar with the storyline that happened in the Sixth Doctor's era, where like the entire season was the trial of a Time Lord story arc?
Not greatly.
Okay, they're doing something very similar to that, where basically the entire the season is going to be like an 8-part movie. Like the entire 8-episode season is one story.
Okay.
Which is going to be fun. There's some old villains returning, already confirmed returns for the Weeping Angels and the Sontarans, and they've got a subtitle for it this time around. Like, they're not calling it Doctor Who Series 13; they're calling it Doctor Who Flux, which ought to be interesting. The trailers look very, very interesting, and I'm holding out hope that that it's good, because I want it to be good so bad. But I wonder if by announcing Russell T when they did, I'm wondering if it just like killed all anticipation for Series 13 and just put it all on the future. You know,
It could. Yeah. Who knows?
but yeah, I still watch it. I'm just not as excited about it as I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while since I've gone into it.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the podcast.
Yeah.
Before we got into the podcast, were you at all familiar what a podcast was, or were you listening to any at the time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been listening to podcasts for a while. Mostly sermons and spiritual conversations and things like that. There was a couple other secular podcasts that I would listen to, and more just goofy stuff. I mean, like our Neosporin episode. It was just plain goofiness.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I'd been listening to podcasts for a while. That was the first time I'd ever been part of one. But yeah, I've been listening to him for a while.
Okay. So, what's next for you, CJ?
Just in my life.
Whatever you want.
Let's see. I mean, hopefully continuing to teach for a long time, because though it is exhausting and draining and stressful, I'm loving it. And so hopefully I continue to do that for a long time. I know the goal for me at this particular school, expressed by both me and school leadership, is eventually to move me up into the older grades. That's the long-term goal. That's what everybody wants to do. So and my high school is my dream career anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So long-term, that's where we're headed. More short-term, like I said, still looking for auditions, looking for ways to continue to hone my own craft. I always remember one of the best pieces of advice that Andy Gefkin ever gave me was when he said, like, even when you're a teacher, you need to start looking for, or keep looking for, opportunities for yourself to keep acting, because you want to show your students that this thing that you keep saying is so awesome is still important to you, and that you're still practicing it, and that you're still doing it, and that it's not just those who can't teach sort of situation, but where you're still very, very active in it. So that's on the horizon, and I'm looking for more ways to do that. I am considering trying to work at Disney over the summer. I'm considering that. Just to that would be another, performance type job, and at a place that I love dearly. And so I'm thinking about that. The trouble with me and performing is that black box that I've been auditioning at is the only one in my area that does plays rather than musicals. And I'm so weak in the area of dancing that I much prefer plays over musicals.
Yeah.
I do, just in general, like as an actor, I have more to work with in a play, and less other stuff consuming my attention. I don't have to worry about the singing and the dancing. I can just commit myself to the part. But also, just I can't dance to save my life. So I've got like 3 musical theaters around here, and only this one that does plays. So that's a little bit frustrating, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. That's about it. That's like on my radar right now. Other than that, just living life, man.
And I get that. Well, thank you, CJ, for coming back on here.
Yeah, you bet.
It was a pleasure to have you talk about these things and share this anniversary with us. So,
Yes.
Thank you for coming again.
Absolutely.
All right, back to you, John. Thank you, John. All right, so I'm here with the lovely Speedy for this interview. Hello, Speedy.
Hey. Hi.
Yes, Speedy has been on this podcast, at least 4 years now, so you're one of our oldies as well, so
Yes,
good.
I can't believe it's been 5 years. It's crazy.
Yes. But anyway, Speedy, why don't you just tell us about yourself for a bit?
Sure. Um, so I'm Speedy. I got that nickname because I always ran out of math class as fast as possible because math sucks. Um, I am a junior in college. So about this time, I'm supposed to be figuring out what my future's supposed to look like. So that's insane. Um, my favorite hobbies include giving my cat a kiss every single time I see her and drinking tea. Um, and also, I like doing art, uh, specifically calligraphy. What
Calligraphy.
else? Yeah. Right now, I'm working on what's called an illuminated manuscript, which is really cool. It's this old art form of like depicting Bible stories. You see it in like old Bibles and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The famous one being the Book of Kells, uh, which was made in the this is an island or area in Ireland of Iona. It's really cool. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Nice. The second one, which might take a bit of thinking. How did we meet?
Oh my word. Um,
Hmm.
we met in middle school.
Yeah,
You are a year above me.
yeah,
Um, you had just moved to our area,
I did. Yeah,
and you started as an eighth grader, if I remember correctly.
that's true.
Okay. Um, and that's not really how we met, though,
No,
because you were around, but you and I didn't really hang out or talk
no,
much. I
no. I,
remember.
I don't remember like my first interaction with you.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the very first, yeah, I don't remember. You were just you were like this enigma almost. Like you had this like you just kind of wandered and hovered, and I had no idea who you were, but like, and then you always like said the randomest, coolest facts. I'm like, who is this man? But I didn't get to know you until I think I was a freshman. So
hmm,
2 years later, um, and we would have meet early in the morning at the round tables. Do you remember that?
yeah, at the
We'd
round
come
tables.
early. Um, and we'd wait for everyone to start coming in. I always ended up coming early because I had math tutoring in the morning. There's math
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
And I don't know why you came in early. I think you just did.
Oh, it's because my mom's a teacher, and so she
Yeah,
comes in early, and I follow.
there you go. Yeah, that basically the same here with my parents being faculty members as well some days. So, I get it. But yeah, and then you and I had theater together, which is where
Yeah.
we really got to know each other.
Hmm.
You were King Oberon, right?
uh, the Duke of Athens. Yes.
That's yes, in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Theseus. Yeah.
And I was a palace guard. So, and the way we had it set up was like they split like sections of actors of based on like areas.
Hmm.
And so since you and I were both palace members, you and I spent more time together than if like the fairies or whatever. So that was
Oh
fun.
yeah. Yeah. It was fun. Um, what's even more fun was the Curious Savage days.
Yes. Oh my word. Honestly, that I think is my favorite play ever. Just the family that we made with the cast. The
Yeah.
stage was gorgeous.
Hmm.
It felt really like a living room space.
Like if it wasn't for the actual play itself, it was just like the interactions we had around the show.
Yes.
Like backstage, like before, during intermission. You remember
Mm-hmm.
before like we
Yep.
started that beautiful scene, we'd always just dance to the same song.
Yes. Lollipop.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of like our warm up because you and I started the scene right after intermission. It was just you
Mhm.
and me on stage.
Yeah.
And so we were waiting backstage for the lights didn't come on. We had to come on stage beforehand, or I
Yeah.
did at least.
Yeah, you did.
Um, but we had to wait there, and so we would just dance the lollipop, and then our scene would commence. And I think that was one of my favorite scenes on stage.
It definitely is, yeah. It's one that I'd like to just go back to one day. So,
Yeah.
let's see. Also, I guess like when meeting you, I always just confused you for your sister.
You wouldn't be the first.
Because I think like I met her first, and
Hmm.
then you, and I always like get confused, and it's like, wait, who's who? I don't know. I don't know you people. I'm just following Matthew or Toe around. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
I. Uh. It doesn't help that she and I had the same voice, basically. So, and we had very similar hair color and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
it that certainly didn't help. I'm sure. But yeah.
Yeah. So when did you first hear about this podcast?
Trying to think back. Well, if I remember correctly, this podcast started out first as a project, right? As a school project? Or at least that's where I first heard about it.
That the school project was like a separate thing. If you remember the story, was we did a school project in a Bible class
Hmm.
where we wanted to tell like the story of the New Testament, the story of Jesus in like a radio drama format.
Hmm.
And so we wrote this podcast for it. And on the script, I just couldn't come up with a podcast name, so I just put podcast name in brackets so that whenever we recorded it, we just make that up on the spot. However, our beautiful and lovely friend Carell, he just read it as podcast name, and it was a joke, and so whenever I made my podcast, I just kept that joke in as like an honor. So
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
think it's perfect too. It really it's unique, but it's also kind of poking fun a little bit. So I think it's the perfect name.
thank you. Um, but yeah, I believe your first appearance on the podcast was for Rogue One.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I had just seen it because we all went to the theaters. I remember that, and that's like I never go to the theaters, but everybody wanted to go, so I went. Um,
Yeah, like we went to the
and
theaters together. Like you,
yeah,
me, Matthew, Toa, so and so.
there's so many people. I think we bought out like a whole row or something. We all
Yeah,
went to go see
something
it.
like that. And then we went over to Matthew's house, and I think we watched the first movie, like A New Hope,
Yeah,
right
I think so
after.
too. And then that weekend, I went and I watched the the rest of them. I think like
Mm,
5 through I think 8 had been released at that point. Um, no, 7
no.
had
Well,
been
no.
released.
Actually, no. Wasn't. Didn't we do our marathon at that point?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
I just remember like taking one weekend where I watched all the Star Wars movies, basically,
I,
like,
I
or a
know
good amount of them.
I know I had a marathon where I watched the original trilogy, and it probably was around that time.
Yeah, it would
And
make
then
sense.
yeah, and then the next year, yeah, and then of course the next year followed was 2017, and then we had all my movie marathons that I did all the time. So
Yeah, those are fun.
yeah, those
I
were
ate
fun.
so much food.
Oh yeah,
Oh my word.
can't do that anymore. But
Yeah, I know, right?
yeah. Um. So before you got into the podcast, like, were you like just aware of podcasts in general, or what were your thoughts on podcasts?
Um, so I had listened to a couple of podcasts, like
Mhm.
maybe like a couple of episodes of different ones. I'm not gonna be able to remember which ones anymore. But I hadn't really like I have a hard time like paying attention to them if I'm not doing something else. So I didn't and I didn't know this at the time, so I didn't really gravitate towards that the world of podcasts. But I remember it gaining a lot of popularity at the time. Like everybody was coming out with a podcast. Uh because I remember being into a couple of YouTubers, and then all of a sudden they had podcasts, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So you're doing daily videos, and you're doing like monthly videos, and you're doing a podcast. Like, it was a lot. So, but it had been on my radar, and I'd listened to a couple, but I wasn't into the world yet.
Gotcha. So you've been on the podcast a few times. And so what would be your favorite memories or your favorite podcasts that we've done?
Oh, favorite podcasts. That's a good question. I was listening to one the other day about top animes.
Oh my.
And those are fun. Honestly, like I kind of listen to your podcast to like get recommendations for like different movies and different shows and stuff like that. I'm like, what's good? What should be on my watch list?
Gotcha.
But yeah. What about
Okay.
you? What's one of your favorite memories?
Oh, one of my favorite memories. Oh boy, favorite memories. I don't know. I've been doing this for 5 years now. There's just a lot of podcasts. I've done every podcast on this list here, which is over 70 at this point.
Yeah, wow. I will say one of my favorites, I think, was I'm a huge musical person, so your podcast on musicals. Though very some of the decisions were very interesting.
I was very uninformed, definitely.
As someone who's like obsessed with musicals, I was like, wow, this is a very interesting list. But it just went to show you like how like musicals can, like, different people will like very different musicals.
True. And then, of course, I'm not really within the world of musicals itself, so I don't really know that many. So the ones that the most I got really to know about in the shows that I do here at Liberty, that's just kind of what I get to do. But yeah, definitely. I say this is probably my favorite memory because it's like I never got to see this one through into fruition. And that was our first podcast on The Force Awakens. I don't know if you remember about this, but you weren't on it, but we recorded this podcast about 2.5 hours long. Very first podcast.
Okay.
And then I found out that the audio file got corrupted. And so
no.
I only had audio for half of the members in the podcast. And so you could hear only one side of a conversation. And
that's so frustrating.
It's so frustrating because I still feel like that was our best podcast ever.
Oh my word. Especially now that like you can't really go back and resurrect it. It's just getting like better and better in your mind.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Oh,
getting better and better. It's like I had no format. It was just fun people talking about things and just going whatever. It was me, Toa, Matthew, and FlameWolf on that first podcast, which is just a good combination.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that. So, in the future, if you were given the opportunity, would you return to the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, sit around talking to with my friends about random topics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's basically what we do.
It is, isn't it?
Why not?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what's next for you, Speedy?
Oh my word, what's next for me? Well, school. I'm finishing that up. Looking at different internship opportunities. Because of COVID, it's not looking amazing, but there is a possibility that I might be able to actually travel abroad for my internship this summer. So that would be cool. Right now, it's very tentative, but it could be possibly either an area in Europe or an area in Asia, and those areas are huge. So trying to figure that all out. But yeah, and then trying to hone in on my interests. This next semester, I'm taking a class in Sanskrit, which is crazy, especially because like Sanskrit's known for being extremely difficult, but I was like, why not? um, so maybe that will point me in some direction of like what I want to do. But yeah, just trying to gain new interests and look into keep poking at different possibilities and options out there.
All right.
I think that's what like you're supposed to be doing in college anyway, so why not?
Sure. Don't follow college rules. But
Exactly.
yeah. But yeah, thank you for coming on to this interview, Speedy. It's nice to have you
Yeah.
here again.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. This was very, very fun.
All right. My pleasure. So yeah, back to you, John. Thank you, John. All right. So I'm here with Matthew, who is, again, one of our longest running hosts of this podcast here. So hello, Matthew.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Yes, of course. Matthew. We have some questions here. And so the first question is, tell us about yourself. Who are you, Matthew?
Well, I am a senior in college right now. I'm studying international relations. I'm a big fan of film. I'm getting a minor in film, in fact. And yeah, I've been on the podcast since the first episode, I believe, and in quite a few episodes since.
Yes, you also do some reviews, don't you?
Occasionally, yeah. I like to write out my thoughts sometimes, and occasionally I'll post them somewhere, and then I have a Letterboxd account, which I update regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's nice, nice. And so, tell us the story of how we met, the two of us.
Oh, I
Gotcha.
don't know if I remember that. We were in middle school.
Yes.
And you had just arrived.
Mm-hmm.
We were at the same school. I believe it was 8th grade.
Yes.
We had a few classes together. I remember we had a math class together.
Yes, very most prominently where we hung out during class times.
And then we did a lot of group projects together through school. Got to know each other through that. Had a lot of mutual acquaintances.
And all the fun stuff that happened then.
Yeah.
All right. And so, what was your ideas or opinions of podcasts before? Have you heard any of podcasts before? Were you listening to podcasts before? What are your general thoughts on podcasts beforehand?
I had heard a few podcasts. I hadn't had much experience with the medium. There was one film podcast that I listened to quite a bit, which I believe stopped in 2013, so 2 years before we started doing this. But yeah, it wasn't something that I generally did in my free time. I did more audiobooks and music. But yeah, since joining the podcast, I've started listening to more podcasts and kind of feel a bit more familiar with the medium.
Okay. And so, do you remember when I first approached you about this podcast?
I do not remember exactly when. I do remember our first episode, though.
Oh, yes. That sad episode.
I believe half of the audio is missing. It's quite the episode.
It's sure, yes. You get to listen to half of a conversation.
Yep,
And
and longer than the movie.
Longer than the movie, yeah. Most of
talking
it's
about.
just silence, of course, but you get to hear our nods, grunts, and audible reactions.
It wasn't silent when we were recording it. It was when we lost half the audio. That's when it became silent.
Yes, of course. When we lost half of our audience, or half of our speakers due to that problem. But yeah, this being, of course, 5 years since we started this podcast, how do you feel?
I mean, I'm always excited to do new episodes. I don't know how many listeners we have, but it's a lot of fun getting to talk to you and be on the podcast, get to talk about movie stuff.
Mm,
It's just a great time.
yes. And then, of course, what would be your favorite memories of this podcast, or your favorite episodes that we've done so far?
I like all of our top five of the year. Those are always fun to pull together,
Mm,
especially when we have a lot of guests with them.
yeah, those are
Um,
always fun to look forward to.
yeah, and I mean, throughout the year, I'm constantly updating my list, waiting for, what am I going to say on the podcast? How am I going to, which movies do I want to talk about?
Mm,
Um, it's fun. I like finding images for each movie that I
yeah.
want to talk about. I like finding the worst movies and trying to imagine how I'm going to talk about those. It's always fun to prepare for those.
Mm. And of course, uh, if given the opportunity, which I doubt there would be a lack of that, but if given the opportunity, would you ever return to the podcast?
Oh yeah, I will return whenever I am able. I enjoy being a guest and talking about movies.
Yes, my lovely side host. Um, so yeah, so what's next for you, Matthew?
Next, well, I graduate from college in a few months, so we'll see where I end up, but I plan hopefully to continue being on the podcast as long as I am invited to. So,
All right. All right, so thank you for joining us, Matthew. It's nice to have you here again.
yeah, it's great being here.
All right. So yeah, back to you, John.
Thank you, John. Okay, so I'm here with Fenrir in this interview. So, hello, Fenrir. How are you doing?
Hello there, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good, and welcome to this anniversary podcast.
It is my pleasure.
All right, Fenrir. Now tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, just some dude. Well, basically, I've been doing a lot of streaming lately, Spanish though, so yeah. And also, I am an artist. Also, Proud
Mhm.
Brony since 2013.
Yeah, nice year. So yeah, can you tell us how we first met?
Well, actually, we first met through my brother, FlameWolf,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he used to be great friends with you. Actually, not
Yeah.
so sure lately how that's going, but hey,
We still chat. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Cause well, we've been talking around, and when you told me about this invitation that you had for today, I was actually quite intrigued about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And well, when we met, actually, there was this very fun situation about going to BronyCon for the first time, which was, well, thanks to you, we got an amazing opportunity to do that,
mhm.
and it was one of the greatest moments of my whole life. So, yeah, I basically hold you at very high regard right now.
Yeah. Uh. Yeah, I think that is partly when we first met. Yeah. You and your mother came down to visit to talk about the convention. I know that was one time.
Yeah.
But another time was during our very first podcast episode where we were doing The Force Awakens. And it was me, Toa, and your brother, FlameWolf. But you were listening while we were recording. And after the episode, you joined the call and we talked and scheduled it in for another podcast episode.
Was that the first time?
That would have been one of the first times. Yeah.
Wow. I guess the memory of all that time back is kind of weird to me right now because I could have sworn that the whole podcast happened after BronyCon, but maybe I'm just being silly.
Yeah, it was definitely before BronyCon, for sure. Because it was right after 2015, and we had BronyCon in 2016.
Yeah, definitely. We went over to BronyCon 2016. I remember that one very clearly.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we bump into each other the next year.
Yeah, that was very fun. Like, I remember not expecting it for some reason. I guess I was told that you were going to be really busy that year. What with, college and whatnot. I guess it was about to start at the time. So when we were talking during the first trip, that was like a huge point of conversation, and I was like, "Oh, he's probably gonna be too busy to be there." But no, I was pleasantly surprised to see you. You
Yes,
actually...
I made an effort. We just bumped each other into each other. I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing here?
Yeah, I guess you could call my reaction the same. It was kind of surprising, but again, pleasantly surprising because, I feel like I owe a lot of that experience to you and your willingness to help. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe I already answered this question, but do you remember first hearing about this podcast here?
Yes, kind of. I do remember that you were going to do it with my brother, and then you invited me to join as well to talk about movies, right? Wasn't the first time we
Yes.
talked about the best movies 2015, 2016 or something?
Yes, it was the top 5 of 2015.
It's actually very funny, like remembering back to that time, because I remember being very nervous about it. Like, it's the first time I'm going to be in a podcast kind of thing, and I went like, shoot, I haven't watched that many movies. Uh, what should I do now? Like, I should make memory about everything that I've watched. And I very vividly remember recording that podcast because right after the fact, I found it so funny that we were all talking about great movies that we saw that year, right? And all of a sudden, we were talking about that whole thing, and I could tell how surprised you were at the time when I said, like, I was like, one of the best movies I saw this year was like the Peanuts movie, because
yeah.
because I felt like I had grown up with the cartoons, and I felt like it struck really close to the spirit of them. But then, upon hearing the podcast later, and upon later chatting with you and everything, I was feeling kind of awkward, like that. I was like, shoot, I saw so very few movies that year that I was like, did I seriously include the Peanuts movie in the top of the year list? And I always thought it was very funny / embarrassing, but hey, that's just another fun memory I treasure now.
Yes, and then of course the big next time we had their podcast together was for the My Little Pony movie when that came out in 2017.
Yeah. That was a great experience. I probably talked to you about how I went to like see the movie with the Brownie group over here in Ecuador, and it was like this very big event that didn't used to happen all that often.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we've done much since then.
Yeah. Not
But have
really.
you seen the new movie that just came out?
Actually, I kind of wanted to, but I haven't done that yet because it's actually not available in the Netflix catalog for Ecuador.
Oh, okay.
So, and I haven't done the whole VPN thing, so
okay.
so it's actually not available to me as much as I've searched for it, because it was this huge thing in the fandom, when it came out, and everyone was being like, "Oh my god, G5 is here and the movie is great," and it wasn't. Some people were going like it wasn't nearly as bad as they thought it would be. Honestly, I don't have that strong of an opinion yet because I usually like to, watch the thing first. But a lot of people, turns out, were pleasantly surprised with it, and I still know nothing. I haven't even been spoiled. I just know, like, the character designs and everything, and I was like, oh no, I can't watch it here. It's so sad.
Yeah.
Because I honestly tried, but still haven't gotten around to it. I don't know what I'm gonna do to get that fixed, but hey, that's just how it goes.
Right. And before you got onto the podcast, were you aware of podcasts in general, or did you listen to any at the time?
I wasn't listening to any, but I did have a vague idea about the concept and the format because, I wasn't consuming any. It always seemed like a very curious thing to me. But when it comes to content, I would usually lean some other way, right? Because I was always interested in, as you may know, in doing gameplay and stuff because
Yeah.
I'm very huge on video games and whatnot. And usually when it comes to that, you go one of two formats, right? Either you live stream or you start posting the videos on YouTube and stuff like that. Basically recording yourself, editing, blah blah blah. And
Mm.
that's mostly what I did. So it would be like, oh, it's, I don't know, Mario Maker episode 1, Mario Maker episode 2, etc etc. But it always came with some visual attached to it. And when it came to podcasts, I remember the concept feeling kind of weird at the time, being like, "Oh, okay, you just listen to this conversation go on and whatever, get the news, get some stories read, get
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
information conversation." I have actually grown more interested in it with the years. Like lately, I have been trying to get into some podcasts I will enjoy, and also, of course, I watched all of the episodes that we made with you with the podcast and some of the other ones.
Mhm.
But since I wasn't too big on the whole thing, I didn't consume it for a while. And only lately I've come to really appreciate what it does bring to the table because now I'm a way busier person than I used to be. And that's when podcasts really come in handy because you don't really need to be looking at the thing. You can just listen to something that interests you. And I've grown to really appreciate that because, again, I'm much busier now than I used to be. And it's just convenient to have something to listen to and stuff that interests you overall.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, during your time in the podcast, do you have any favorite moments that or favorite memories in general of our time together?
Well, I remember again being really excited about talking about the first My Little Pony movie because that was
Mm-hmm.
a very huge moment for me. I remember watching it with my girlfriend at the time and the whole group of bronies, and it was honestly unforgettable. It also grew a whole bunch of different memories too. Treasure as well, but talking about the whole experience, I've always been one to share how things feel, how I remember them, and talking about the experience, not only having it, but getting to share it through some other format with someone who may not have been there, as it was, the case with you. That's also very special to me. I've always loved telling a story, and I wasn't disappointed to do that. But also, again, the whole Peanuts movie moment. I will never remember that because I was so sure at the time when we were talking about it. I was so like, "Oh yeah, the Peanuts movie. It was great." And to some extent, I don't really regret that because again, I saw very little movies that year. But but at the same time, I was looking back at that with a tiny bit of embarrassment, being like, "Oh, oh, the Peanuts book." I remember laughing my heart out when I saw that you posted the episode, and I saw the thumbnail on YouTube, right? And there
Mm-hmm.
were all these movie characters and whatnot, and all of a sudden it was just Snoopy hanging around there. I loved that, and it was one of the most embarrassing moments I think I've gone through in hindsight, but it's also one of the funniest. And I nobody has reminded me of that through the years, but I don't think I'll ever let myself leave that one down. So yeah, I love that about being a guest here in the podcast.
And of course, I would never forget this moment that's not on the podcast, but when your brother somewhat met Tara Strong.
Oh yeah, we also did talk about that in the post-con video that you posted, right?
Yeah.
I remember telling that story during that video too. Well, yeah, I didn't really bring it up because I thought we were talking about the moments in the podcast, but
Yeah.
I guess it kind of counts, because of the video. Yeah, that was also very, very funny. Didn't happen while in the podcast, but oh my god. Actually, I was just recently thinking about that story for whatever reason. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. My brother, actually kind of got to bump shoulders with Tara." It was like it's still such a weird memory because I was like, "Oh, I guess that's a thing that happened."
Oh, I will never forget that moment. Yeah.
Stuff that
So,
again, we should never let him live that one down.
oh no, never.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what's next for you, Fenrir, as we go on from here?
Well, as we go on from here, you know that I previously dabbled a lot in streaming, and basically I've been trying to pick that back up. But again, I've been doing streams fairly constantly. I would say like 4 or 5 a week, and it's been going well. We've been growing slowly, and that's what I'm putting most of my focus now. Besides, the usual things that keep you busier. Like recently, I just got a new job, and also I'm kind of living by myself in my own apartment now. So that's been a pretty fun, if tiring experience. The whole moving and all of that. It's been
Yeah.
quite a ride, but I'm actually very happy that I get to dedicate more time to stuff like that because when you're streaming stuff or the simple fact that we're having this conversation right now, it's way easier to handle when you're not paying attention to how everyone feels about the noise you're making, basically. And also at the time when we used to have the podcast and all of that, I was sharing a room with my brother, so it wasn't always the easiest thing to get stuff
Yeah.
done. Kind of awkward at times, kind of uncomfortable. But now that I've got my apartment, yeah, the responsibilities have multiplied, but also I get to spend a lot of time my own way, and that's been very fun. So what's next for me, I guess, is just keeping the streak going. Maybe keep streaming, keep growing steadily. If anything, that's kind of what I want to dedicate my time the most when I'm not doing job or still accommodating stuff here at the apartment. But I'm kind of feeling hopeful about it because it's been like 5 months since I've been streaming games steadily through Twitch. Again, streams in Spanish, so do with that information what you will. But we've been growing steadily, and I'm proud to say we recently reached the 200 follows, and I plan to keep that rising as long as I can.
Well, good. And so that's all we have for now. Thank you for coming back to just talk about your time on the podcast these past years, and just thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really special. And again, remembering all of these experiences, it really blows my mind. Not only how long it's been, but also how great it all was. And being in the podcast, being completely honest, did mark a point. There was a before the podcast and after the podcast, right? Because like I said, at the time I was very intimidated when we first did it, and I probably wasn't, kind of with all that confidence, but it's been a while since that, and I guess it really helped me to just get better at expressing myself, which I kind of had issues with, even though I didn't have a language issue. It was just kind of, okay, I've got the mic here. What do I do now? But yeah, it's been a while since then, and I can say I remember it very fondly. So it's been great. Thank you very much.
And thank you again. Back on to you, Matthew.
Thank you, John. I'm sitting here with Kat, who's been a longtime contributor to the podcast. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm currently studying technical communications at college.
Okay. And Kat, where do you see yourself a year from now, maybe?
Still in college.
Okay. So you joined our podcast quite a few years ago. Do you remember what your first episode was?
Yeah, it was the 2016 Top 5 Movies of the Year one. I don't know what the official title of it is.
Yeah, and you've been on quite a few episodes since then as well. As a frequent contributor to the podcast, do you have any podcasting memories that stick out to you?
Well, I like doing the podcast when I can either be with like Matt or both Matt and John together in the room, because I just like the connection you give. But even when we have like online people as well participating, it's just really nice to hold conversations.
Okay, yeah. And is there anything that you've learned about the podcast making process over the last, I guess, 4 years that you've been doing this, or the last 5 years that this podcast has existed?
To be honest, I don't do a whole lot behind the scenes. It's more just show up and talk, but it's just really nice how, like, you can hold conversations, and, like, before and after even the podcast is being filmed, we're able to talk with each other and interact. So it's just nice how the podcast itself helps bring us together, and it gives us something to talk about, too.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Anything else to add?
Thank you, John.
Okay, back to you, John.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so, yeah. I'm here with our classic FlameWolf here. Hello, FlameWolf. How are you doing today?
Sorry for the interruption. I gotta get used to the podcast format, but classic. Yeah, but isn't that a bit of a stretch?
I mean, you were in our very first couple of episodes, so you're classic to my heart.
All right, okay.
So how are you doing today, FlameWolf?
I'm alright today. It's been a lazy day.
Oh yes, a nice sleeping weather.
Yeah, well, regardless of the weather, I would just spend a whole bunch of time in bed. Then I got up, then I did a bunch of nothing, and now I'm working.
Yes, just like the rest of us humans. So anyway, FlameWolf, tell us about yourself.
As if nobody knew me at all?
Yes, who are you and what do you do?
Alright, I'm a South American digital artist from the furry community. Deal with it. What else can I say? I mean, I do a whole bunch of digital art. I work on commissions. I have a pretty decent following on certain pages that don't have the best of reputations, but I mean, what can you get?
Yeah.
And what else can I say about myself? I play a whole bunch of video games all the time. It's mainly what I do. Like, some people are big into movies, some are into series. I never watch series. I just play a whole bunch of video games. That's my thing.
All right. And can you tell us, do you remember how we first met?
I do not. I remember general, like, settings. Like, I remember seeing you in class, on English class.
Yeah.
And I remember that the first person from that group, so to speak, that I approached was Trey, actually. And he was my friend, and it's very likely that from there I started talking to you. I don't really remember. Do you remember?
Yeah, English class is definitely where I remember you the most. You definitely were hanging out with Trey a whole lot. Really where I was mainly introduced to you was you would do these little doodles on a small whiteboard. And you would draw people as different animals. Like, you drew me as a cat one time. And then you drew me as a shrimp.
Yeah, I remember the shrimp one.
Yes.
I actually was thinking about that the other day, and I was like, how did that come to be? I know it was kind of a joke thing,
It
but
was
I don't
a
remember,
joke.
I remember it was a joke, but I don't remember what the process, the thought process was behind all of that. Like, I need to draw shrimp lemon.
I mean, we were joking about something, and then someone like told you, "Hey, why didn't you draw John as a shrimp?" And like, we were laughing.
Really? Is that it? I really don't remember.
It was something like that, and then you showed up the next day with a drawing of Shrimp Lennon, and it was just like, oh, he actually did it. But yeah, where I really started to first bond with you was, again, you were drawing on the whiteboard, and you were drawing cutie marks from ponies. And
Damn, I don't remember.
oh, I remember that vividly. And so yeah, because like it was again one of the few times where like I was getting into the show, and I'd not seen anyone besides Trey who had watched the show. And then here you are drawing these cutie marks, and I'm thinking, oh hey, this guy knows what's going on, and so we talked.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah, you used to when you still watch the show.
Yeah, yeah. By the point I was there in that school,
Yeah.
at Alliance, I had already been watching it since it had come out and it started being a big thing. I dropped it. I mean, I still wear a couple of cool shirts that I had, but yeah, I dropped. I don't even remember the season, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's like halfway through what's released now. I don't know.
Yeah, you had stopped around season 7 because I was the main one that was forcing you to watch.
Yeah, you were.
And yeah, it just became a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, and me, just like I said in my introduction, me not being a series person.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up. I mean, I watch a bunch of anime, but only because there are many of them that are like 8 or 12 episodes, and that's it. So it's easy for me to watch that. And you have other stuff like, I don't know, Dragon Ball that has like 800 episodes. I'm not keeping up with that.
Oh,
I can't handle that kind of stuff.
No, like 26 isn't like enough for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course, now the show has ended, and we recently had a brand new movie for the next stage of pony stuff.
Right.
And I take it you're likely not going to get into that stuff again.
I mean, I'm not hyped for it. I'm not looking forward to it. It's not like, oh my god, I need to watch it. It's just maybe I get to watching it at some point. I'm not close-minded. I know I liked the early seasons from the show, and I really like them. It's not like I stopped liking it or that I became like some people that kind of like grow out of it and are like, I don't watch that stuff anymore. No, I mean, I still like it, and I keep an open mind. So if it comes across my way one way or another, I may watch it.
Yeah, when you're
but it's not something
older and you got kids and they gotta watch the show, then you'll see it again.
Yeah, something like that sounds about right.
Yes. So going on into the podcast, do you remember when you first heard about this podcast or how you got involved with it?
No. Okay, so here's something that I need to clarify. Sounds cliche or some sort of exaggeration. I promise you it isn't.
Yeah.
But I lost a whole chunk of my memory because of heavy. I was about to swear, but a heavy treatment.
Thank you.
A really heavy treatment that I had to go through, and it was a couple of years process. It was really, really excruciatingly painful, but as a result, many of my memories from like a 4-year period, it's weird. Imagine if I told you, like, hey, do you remember when you were 4 and you went to the beach? You can probably tell of an instance where you were 4 and went to the beach, but you can't really remember what happened or what was it or what did you do. It's kind of like that.
I see.
It's kind of like that. So, yeah, it is hard for me to remember many things.
So you have a vague feeling and like some images, but not really context to really...
Yeah, exactly. For example, when I was talking about how I met you, it's like I remember seeing you and sitting next to you in English class, but I can't remember if we ever exchanged that word or what was I doing on the English class, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that kind of stuff.
And then
It's just I know the concept, and the concept is I used to see you in English class, and that's about it.
right, and so you don't recall any first interactions about the podcast.
No, I don't. I remember in your home over at the States, we recorded a video. I don't remember what it was about, but it probably has to do something with the podcast, right?
In the home at the States, it was our BronyCon video.
Yeah.
Where we tortured you with the story about Tara Strong and how you bumped into her without knowing.
Yeah, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the podcast. You were part of a very first episode, which sadly we lost your audio. Yeah,
All
it
right.
was the worst first episode to have, where we did it. We had a great first video, and then I lost the recording for half of our members.
Damn. And you didn't publish it anywhere?
I published the other half of the conversation. Because I just wanted to show something. So our first episode is just like me and Matthew talking, and just
Matthew.
Matthew. I'm typing you the name.
There's a Matthew. Hold on.
Don't.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
His secret name, Matthew.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
And
I was just about to freak out. Like, oh my god, what did I forget?
Oh yeah, don't worry. Sorry about that. But yeah, we lost half of the recording of that episode, which is a bummer because we had some good conversations. But luckily, you came back to do our next episode, which was the top 5 movies of 2015. You and your brother Fenrir were a part of that one.
Yeah, no, I got nothing.
Oh, that's fine. You can always listen back on the episode. And then later on, you just had like a couple appearances here and there. One was about Ruby. And then
I remember you introduced me to that show.
Did I? I must have.
You did?
Okay.
I remember you showed me the trailers, so one of the times I went to your place, I was like, that looks cool, yeah, let's watch it.
Okay, I must have forgotten that.
Yeah, I'm unsure whether we watched it together, but we probably did.
Something happened, yeah.
But yeah, I remember that you introduced me to it.
I don't know why I don't remember that, but good to know. Thank you. And then I think the last major thing we worked on was in 2017 when the My Little Pony movie came out.
There was a whole bunch of movies, right? Maybe 3 of them? Including the Equestria Girls stuff.
Yes, we didn't talk about that one. The main one that we were talking about was like the official Ponies movie that came out.
The one thing I can remember about that movie is that there's Pony Sia somewhere.
Yes.
But I don't remember what's about. I remember that the animation was pretty nice. Funnily enough, I also remember that only as a concept. Like, I know the animation on that movie is nice. I can't tell you why or what does it stand out about it because I don't remember what it looks like.
Yes. And so before you got onto the podcast, were you ever aware of what a podcast was, or did you listen to any podcasts at the time?
I've never listened to any podcasts, so I'm going to say no. Okay. And about knowing what a podcast was, I'm going to say no too, because just like maybe a year ago, I realized what a podcast in the true sense of the word is. You know, like kind of like a radio talk show, so to speak.
Okay.
I don't think I knew at all. No.
Okay. And so this next question, I don't know how you'll be able to answer this, but do you have any favorite memories of the podcast or of our time together?
Yeah, how am I supposed to answer that? I don't remember being in any episodes at all. Also, in terms of questions and just putting it out there just in case, because when you said I don't know how you're about to answer this, I thought maybe you were going a little bit personal or something. Um, with me, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Okay.
All right, I don't like really. So, some people are like, oh, this question may trigger you, or oh, maybe if we talk about this, you'll feel bad. No, with me, we just talk. I'm an honest guy. I like to think I'm an honest guy, and I just say things. I don't really emotionally attach too much to certain things. So it's like, for example, if somebody asks me about my father, I'll just answer. There's what I'm trying to say is that there is no boundaries with me about how personal can you get with a question, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, no boundaries. So I can't tell you about the podcast. No. I can tell you many memories that I like that we had together, of course. That counts as well, right?
Yeah, why don't you try and share one?
All right, so obviously the first thing that comes to mind is when we went over to your place at the stage, right?
Yeah.
I remember that we in the hotel room, me and my brother took turns to sleep on the floor because we didn't want to share a bed.
Yeah.
I remember hanging out with you and watching movies on your basement, on the house up there on that little screen. I think we watched Aliens, was it?
It was Aliens and the Predator movies.
Yes, yeah, something like that.
Yes.
I remember watching
Stupid
that
stuff.
with you over there. Then I have other memories from school, like just hanging out with you, talking. Not doing a lot in lunch, rather than just hang out with you and talking. I remember going to your place and watching movies. I remember I always, when I went to your place, I always like to look at your Bionicle collection.
Oh.
Because I was into that stuff when I was younger, but I was into that stuff, and I had a bunch of my own, so that was cool to see. Yeah, there's a bunch of memories to pick from.
And they all sound like nice ones to me.
Yeah. If I were to tell you that a bad memory with you, I wouldn't be able to, tell you one because I don't want to sound mean. No, I'm just kidding. Because I really don't have one. Perhaps there was the odd time where I agreed to go to your house, and that morning I was like, I don't want to go. But yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, but I really don't have any bad memories. No, not really.
Right. And so, what would be next for you going on here?
You mean in life?
Yeah. So what's next for you, FlameWolf? What do you want to do after this, with your channel or with your career?
What's next for me? I mean, saying it's a career, it's sort of a stretch, Since I got out of college, and this also ties to the memory loss kind of thing, because I actually had to get out because of this treatment that I was going through. So I haven't gone back yet. And during a year-ish period that I got out of college, and I was trying to fix myself and my life and whatever, many things came to mind. I was really stressing out about everything, and I still kind of am a little bit obsessive about things because I worry too much, because it's like, oh my god, I don't have a college degree. Oh my god, am I wasting my life? Should I be doing more? Should I be working? Should I be blah, blah, blah. All those worries, right? That I think we all have. And so what's immediate for the most for the most immediate future, what's next is trying to calm down a bit. Yeah, and it's part of the treatment as well. That's kind of still ongoing. It's trying to accept things a bit more. It's like, okay, I need to take some time. This is fine. I have time. Uh, it, so yeah, to not extend it too much for the immediate future. Just trying to get my life together in those emotional terms. Taking some time, right? And for the future, I really want to publish something big. I'm not talking My Little Pony levels big, right? With conventions and fandom, but I want to put something out. A comic, probably. I have many ideas. A comic, maybe a written book, maybe a series, could be animated. What I want to do is improve my style, improve my workflow, improve my art itself, my digital art. And my end game is just, I want to publish something that can make people think and make people happy. Like, it doesn't have to be a 1984 type dystopian thing to make you think about life and the government. I'm not talking about that. I just want to put something out there that it's so that people can enjoy, that they can feel happy and related to a nice story that they can, like I said, relate to and keep close to their hearts. Because I don't want to be a huge name myself. I don't want to. I don't want to go out there and have people say, "Oh my God, that's Flame. Let's give me an autograph." Yeah, I don't want that kind of thing. But I do want to publish something that reaches millions of people, because in my experience, there are stories, books, movies, series, whatever, that stick to you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I want to put out there something nice that can stick to people's lives like that. Something that they keep close to their heart. That's my... Once I do that, I can die in peace. And because that's all I want. I want to know that people keep something, a story, a comic, whatever, that they keep it close to their heart and relate to it. And they're like, damn, I love it so much. Not because I want the fame, but because I know that that's a really nice feeling to have. And if I could give that feeling to people, that would be really fulfilling,
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, FlameWolf, it was nice to have you back here for this anniversary podcast.
Yay.
Thank you for coming on.
Sure, call me anytime.
I will. Alright, so back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, John. I'm here with Emma, and we're going to do a few questions. First, can you tell me a bit about yourself? What have you been up to recently?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm Emma. I am a senior in college, majoring in graphic design with a sociology minor. In my free time, I love dancing and music and art. And I also love watching movies and TV shows. And I am an avid bookworm.
Okay, great. And you were on one episode of the podcast. Do you have any memories about that?
Yeah. So I think, it was a fun experience for sure. And I definitely felt a little bit out of my depth in that I don't know quite as many details about directors and film genres and all that good stuff. But it was still a fun experience. And yeah, I enjoyed being part of it.
Great. And were there any insights being on a podcast that sort of did you learn anything about sort of the background or what goes on behind the scenes in making podcasts that you found interesting?
Hmm. You know, I think probably one thing is that I would imagine there's a lot more editing involved in podcasts than you think about when you listen to the finished product, just because like when I speak, in an interview like this or when I was part of that podcast, I kind of suddenly become aware of just
how many pauses I take or how many times I say or say something kind of dumb. So just experiencing that, I imagine that, there's a lot of editing that goes on to kind of remove those little things that happen and giving you the final finished and polished podcast that you listen to.
Yeah. And speaking of other podcasts, are there any podcasts that you enjoy listening to or that kind of provide you inspiration or enjoyment?
Yeah, there are a few podcasts that I would say I've listened to with some regularity, but podcasts are definitely one of those things that I always keep telling myself I should listen to more of them, and I always find it hard to actually find the time to do that. So, I have tons of podcasts that people have recommended to me and told me about, but I just have never gotten around to listening to. So maybe someday I'll be able to explore some of those other ones. But some of my favorites that I listen to right now are two sort of slightly spooky, slightly weird fiction podcasts are Welcome to Night Vale and The Magnus Archives. And both of those are just kind of more for just the mindless enjoyment and the laughter or the thrills or spookiness. So I love reading fiction, so I think that also kind of is reflected in how much I enjoy fiction podcasts. And one other that I enjoy as well is the Anthropocene Reviewed. It's a podcast by the author John Green, where he basically just talks about and reviews different um, random aspects of the human existence. And so, yeah, those are always just sort of fun and usually informative. I learn things about penicillin or pterodactyls or things like that that I never knew before. And sometimes you get sort of more personal insight into John Green's life or stories that he has. So those ones are fun as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, it was wonderful having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, back to you, John.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so right now I am joined with ToaLegend, who is one of our classic members. So, hello, ToaLegend. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for coming back and celebrating this podcast with us. And so why don't we begin by you telling us, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, hi, like JPL said. I am ToaLegend. I normally go by Toa, although I know that can get a little confusing within the Bionicle community.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess more recently what has put me on the map was a video by a significantly famous YouTuber, JSchlatt Live is the YouTube channel that it was posted to. Ended up stumbling upon my account and made a video about one of my videos that I made back in, I think, 2011. And since then, I gained about 60,000 subscribers and on YouTube, and then quite a few followers on Twitch and Twitter and whatnot. But more importantly, I've been a member of this podcast for quite a bit of time and good friends with the man JPL in question, and have had a great time watching a great many of his podcasts and listening to them over the course of time.
Of course.
So yeah.
Yes. I do remember that time when the whole JSchlatt thing was just happening, and I was just so excited for you. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, his stuff. I remember when you had how many? Just 30 subscribers?
Yeah, 32 was like the last essentially milestone before everything hit.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And being excited for each one of your new videos, like that animation that you deleted of Matanui.
Yes, there were quite a few things that I deleted. In fact, I got an email from JSchlatt before most of this happened, asking if he could record anything he wanted to record a video about Nibble, so he sent me an email and was like, "Hey, is it okay?" And I quickly unlisted a decent portion of videos,
Wow.
including a good old Five Nights at Freddy's knockoff.
Oh
we
yes,
had.
that one.
Yeah.
That one.
It's actually, funnily enough, still featured in the JSchlatt video. I don't think I unlisted it in time, but all of the others were unlisted in time.
Yes.
But yes, that one was up. It's still in the video. If you look at it, it'll say Five Nights at Bottoms. But yeah, that was a good one.
And is that one deleted or unlisted?
It is unlisted. I don't. Even though there are some that I very much want to delete, I have not deleted any of them. They are all unlisted, just hidden away at this point.
And only the people who have access to it can get it.
Exactly.
Oh man, that was a throwback. Five Nights at Bottoms. That's a big one.
Indeed.
And going back to throwbacks, can you tell us how we first met?
Ooh, how we first met?
Yes.
Well, we were classmates. Let's see. Do I remember? I feel like I was helping with giving tours is when we first met.
I was wondering if you could go back that far. Yes.
Yeah, because I remember specifically in my brain, I was like, that kid over there, I want to be friends with him. I just looked at you and I was like, yeah, that kid, I want to be friends with him. And so thankfully it all worked out pretty well, I would say. And we did become friends.
Yes. It was my school orientation. You were, at that time, you were part of the student council, weren't you?
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, because that was middle school for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time I met you and a bunch of other people whose names I will not name because of reasons.
Yep, fair.
And I do remember you specifically because, of course, coming to class for the first time, you're a familiar face that I recognized. Even though that first year specifically wasn't our best year, because you were pretty much sick that entire year.
Yeah, that was people that know me know that I have stomach issues, and that was a year that they just acted up a bunch, and I ended up staying home from school for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So my social life was not the best because of that, admittedly.
Yeah, and sometimes you were very tired when you came to class, and
very
weren't
often.
the best of temper on a couple occasions, which is understandable.
Yeah, that was the year that I was also learning about sleep schedules, and admittedly have not learned that much since then, being that I think I went to bed last night at 3 a.m. and the night before that was 7 a.m. So we're still learning on that front.
you gotta learn, man. I keep telling you.
Yeah, I know.
You need to go to sleep.
We'll get there eventually.
Go to sleep right after this.
Right after this? Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
Just do it. And then, do you remember how you first heard about this podcast or when you were first approached about this?
If I remember correctly, my first hearing of this podcast was that you were doing a school project and it required some sort of podcast. And so you, even if it was just as like a bit, I believe. And so you called it the podcast name in brackets. And then from that point forward, I believe it was just almost like a radio show kind of thing where you had different voice actors. Yeah. And then I think at one point I was called in to help with voice acting.
You were, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Brought in one time.
Okay. Yeah, and then later on, I remember you asking, you essentially had a good experience with that, so you continued with the podcast and made it more official, put it on YouTube. And I remember you approaching me and Matthew about potentially doing some like top 10 lists for a bunch of different things. And so we would just sit down and record it. What
Yeah.
details am I missing?
Well, the details that you explained earlier about the radio show, that was partially the origins of the podcast, mainly the name. Of course, the name was not intentional. Because, of course, that radio show was scripted, and when I was writing the script, I couldn't come up with a name of a podcast. And so I just put podcast name in brackets in the hopes that whenever we recorded it, someone would have come up with a name. Well, Carell, in his infinite wisdom, read it as it was and created this glorious bit.
That's perfect.
Yes, and I do believe about a year before we actually did the podcast, or a few months before, I had actually mentioned, actually written to you, saying, "Hey, you want to do a podcast at some point?" To which your reply was, "Yes, but I'm busy right now."
That sounds about right.
Yes. Yes. And then it wasn't until, of course, The Force Awakens came out, like a day or two after I watched the movie, or maybe right after I watched it, I called you. And we chatted about it. We had a fun times. And then we eventually did our first podcast about that.
Oh, was that the first podcast?
That was.
Wow.
That was also when we lost our audio for the podcast.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
You can only hear the audio from me and Matthew. You and FlameWolf, there was no audio for you guys. The file got corrupted. And so I was just so frustrated because, like, that was such a fun podcast that I really enjoyed. But hey, I did release that. One half of the conversation is our first episode. But after that, yes, we called you back whenever another Star Wars movie came in, or whenever we wanted to do top 5, or maybe there was some other movie that we wanted to talk about. But yeah, that was how you got involved from my perspective. And so with that, what would be your favorite memories or moments from doing this podcast, or just memories of our friendship in general?
I think easily it was the time that I was able to go down in person with you and Matthew. I think that just has probably some of my most fond memories, just because like we got to be there in person, and we got to hang out. I remember we had just like pizza and soda and stuff, and just chilled. It was a good time.
Yes, I think we recorded like 3 episodes?
I think so, because afterwards my voice was so scratchy.
Oh yes, boy, would I want to redo some of those lists back then. Back when I was TV. And so I know specific for me, I always enjoyed every time we did a podcast together because they're special treats, especially after doing 100 episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also fun because most times I would try and find a way to make you cringe.
Oh yeah.
In my awkward way, I would do my best to make you cringe.
Sabotaging me. I see how it is.
Of course, sabotaging you. Yes, that is. That's how it goes. And so, in our recent experience, we did our 3 episodes on the Bionicle podcast, and from our perspective, they're coming up soon. So, you guys listen to them because they're fun.
Yeah.
And before you had gone onto the podcast, had you known what a podcast was, or were you listening to any at the time?
Yes and no. Like I used to back in the day watch a YouTube channel called The Creatures, and they had a podcast that they had weekly that ended up turning into like a video podcast later on called Creature Talk. And so I had watched a few of their episodes, albeit very different content-wise, being that they oftentimes just didn't have topics and would just talk. They were all very entertaining, whereas ours was a lot more focused on what we were talking about for that day, which I think had a better flow to it in the end.
I mean, yeah, much more structure and just telling you, hey, we gotta talk about this, this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
Whereas with me and my co-host, my new one, we're whatever. We don't know what we're talking about half the time.
That's fair.
Yes. And so, yeah, what's next for you, ToaLegend? What plans do you have for the future?
Well, for a while now, I've been working on, for anybody that's been watching my channel for any period of time, after the whole thing with Jay Schlatt, I offered him a trade of a custom version of Nibble, a Bionicle character that I created when I was young, for a Gorilla Lamp. And he actually sent me a Gorilla Lamp a few months ago, but I wasn't able to get him the Nibble because he was moving. And so I worked on that and actually created a lot of... I made it look a lot better. I'm not going to say too much here, but the packaging itself is quite nice, and I'm excited to see his reaction to it if he does record it at all. He just needs to get in contact with me.
Yes.
So that's probably my next biggest thing. Otherwise, it's pretty much just putting out YouTube videos, live streaming every once in a while, and hopefully you'll see the bigger projects I have that are a little bit more secret coming up soon.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us where we can find you then?
Yeah, my YouTube account is youtube.com/ToaLegend. I'm ToaLegend on all platforms except Twitter, because Twitter hates me, so I have to go by ToaLegend of Ice over there. Yeah, the person that has the ToaLegend tag hasn't posted in years, and Twitter won't give me their account. So that's a bummer.
One day.
Well,
Toa, it's been great having you come back for this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Fun times. It's always fun to chat with you, Toa. And
likewise.
Yeah, back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, John. So I am here with John.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and we're going to ask you a few questions about the podcast experience.
Yes, I felt that, since you were one of our longest running podcast people from the very beginning, I felt that it was appropriate for you to interview me, of course.
Why, thank you. Yeah, that means a lot to me. Being around for so long, we've built up a bit of a rapport, I feel.
Sure.
So, tell me a bit about yourself. What have you been doing recently?
Well, of course, I'm a college student studying theater, so that involves both on-stage performance and backstage production work. And so I also mainly do my YouTube channel, which is where I started this podcast, and then I'm also, for the other listeners, on Anchor, distributing these podcasts on many other platforms. Yeah, I'm just a simple man making my way throughout the galaxy.
Yeah. And how is your time? I mean, you've been doing this podcast for 5 years, and you've been on YouTube even longer than that.
Yeah.
How has that sort of changed your perspective?
My perspective of what specifically?
Oh, on life or on art or creation or podcasting? I don't know.
It changed my perspective. It hasn't really changed much. I know that growing up, I will just tend to do things differently. Starting out this channel with just hoping to be a stop motion thing, and then moving on to doing reaction videos, and then now just focusing on podcasts and reviews. My taste in things have changed. My experience and how I do things have changed. And I guess just my, what would you call it? My desire to do certain things have changed. Right now I'm at a point where I don't feel like wanting to do more reaction videos, so that's why my main focus has been on podcasts. But yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
How did we meet?
All right. So, of course, we mentioned this before in your podcasts, but I I do remember this slightly different. So yeah, again, we met in eighth grade, in the first day of eighth grade. In fact, I know that I was just walking around, and like you, another American shows up, just walks up to me with your giant blonde hair that you had at the time, which was a lion mane. You're tall, and you're like, "Oh, hey, I'm Matthew," and like, "Who are you?" Like, "Oh, I'm John." And so our first class together was the math class, and so that's how we spent our time together. I do remember that we had a test, a quiz on the multiplication tables, and so I remember that I got a perfect score and you did not. So uh, fun memories. But yeah, we also had some fun times in theater. You did lighting at that time, and then our relationship just kind of grew by doing just going to each other's houses, watching movies, and then we started the podcast, sort of to talk about Star Wars, the new movie that came out, and just like an honor of our good friend Carell. So yeah.
Okay. And do you have a favorite podcast memory or a few favorites?
Favorite podcast memory? That's really difficult to say, being that I've been doing this for about 70 some episodes. There's way too many episodes to think of. Not just with you, but with my other host, Christopher, who we've been doing this for so long. Um, I know that I also love with you when we do the top of the year. That's definitely one highlight that I know that I can guarantee that's a podcast with that we do each year. It's always interesting just finding out what were my top five that year. And then my favorite memory is a podcast as well. It's just also when I get the inspiration to do a podcast all of a sudden. I think I enjoy the inspiration the most about doing podcasts when I'm just watching some movie or some scene from a film, and all of a sudden I get inspired to do something, and so that inspiration is just so much fun to have, and it just gets me excited to want to do a podcast on that subject. So yeah.
Yeah. Going along, just jumping off from that, what are some of the things that inspire you as you make this podcast, be it other podcasts or other media that um, you watch or read or listen to?
In terms of what my inspiration was for, say, creating this podcast, I don't know. I know that I had wanted to do some kind of podcast before I even got into podcasts. I had listened to an old podcast called The Three Virtues, TTV. I'm not sure if you heard of them, but they were a Bionicle podcast. And so I would listen for them at the time, and then I listened to another podcast called the Council for Forcecast, which is the Star Wars podcast. And I'd always liked the idea of just having a council of friends to just sit around and just talk about things. And so I'd wanted to do a podcast like for about a year before we eventually started the podcast in 2015, talking about the Force Awakens. And so for the inspiration, just for each one, like I said earlier, just watching scenes in movies and just thinking about different things is what inspired me to do different podcasts. Sometimes just changes in my life make me think, okay, maybe I want to change the format of how I do this podcast, just because I just think it's cleaner to work with. So yeah.
Yeah. And are there any podcasts you're listening to currently that are sort of changing how you want to do this podcast or that you just enjoy?
No, I don't actually listen to podcasts. don't think I've really listened to a podcast in a long time. They're not really my cup of tea, which is interesting how I'm also the one creating these podcasts myself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What are your plans going forward? Do you have any goals, any ambitions that you set for yourself for this podcast or for your YouTube channel?
Uh, my goals right now is to, for my YouTube channel, is just to do reviews of VeggieTales. That's what we got going on right now. We're gonna go with that, and then whatever just happens that I want to do, I'll do it. For this podcast, we'll keep it going for as long as we can until we just don't feel like we have enough steam to work on this. So yeah.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this interview.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll see you later. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, now, this is technically the end of all the interviews. We have no more interviews recorded now. This is officially the end of the podcast. However, before I want to say goodbye, I wanted to just elaborate more on the interview that I gave, because a lot of these interviews were recorded about a year ago, and since then, some plans have changed, and I just wanted to elaborate more on some of the history and just some of the plans going forward. So going forward, we're still trying to continue this podcast, but as you know, some of you do, Christopher has moved away, and he's currently working at another state. And because of that, we can't record as weekly as we would have liked to, or as we have been doing in the past. So, yeah, going forward, we're just going to upload whenever we have something to upload. Hopefully, it won't be like the early days of the podcast where we'd upload once every several months. Because hopefully me and Christopher can just talk more at least once a month, maybe 2 times a month. So, yeah, that's where we're heading now with this podcast. It won't be as frequent as it was, but we're still hoping to do this. Hopefully one day we can just continue doing this for as long as we can. In terms of the YouTube channel, I've kind of retired from doing reaction videos. This is just something that I do. I may be doing 1 or 2 reaction videos whenever I feel like doing them, but for now, I'm technically retired from doing them. I don't really feel motivated to do them, and whenever I do them, I'm not excited while being a part of it. So yeah, right now, my main focus is continuing my professional career, just training myself to just do better. Right now, I've got a new job working in my theater department as a sound assistant, so I'll be learning how to run the soundboard, how to set things up, and hopefully that can help me in the future when deciding the career in theater. I also want to elaborate some things about how the podcast got started. Like I said it multiple times how we started it. Star Wars came out. I wanted to talk about it, and we did. I told you about the name, how it was written in the script, and that's the name that we kept. But there is another side to this which we haven't been mentioning because it's not the easiest thing to talk about. But yeah, back in the earlier days, we had a friend named Connell who has sadly since passed away. But he would be where I would learn mainly what podcasts were. Yes, I was listening to the Three Virtues TTV, but, it was Connell who was essentially a podcast addict. He'd always be talking about some podcast he'd be listening to. He'd go and find podcasts for different things. I remember one just random fact about him is that he went and found a podcast on how to make eggs. just to make eggs. Eggs aren't the most difficult thing to make, but he went and found a podcast to make some eggs. And you know what? He makes some pretty good eggs. And he was the one who got the inspiration to do that school project as a podcast. To write it as a podcast. And so he told me to write it as a podcast. I wrote the script as a podcast. And he was the one who read the podcast name, even though it was meant to be just something where you're supposed to make up a name. But yeah. He also was one who really wanted to do a podcast. And he didn't get the chance to. And that made me want to just do one. Yes, I had wanted to do one on my own, but looking back on the past, it was his love of podcasts, his inspiration that made me want to create this podcast. And so, yes, the podcast name in brackets is my tribute to Corell, because he's the podcast man. He loved podcasts. And if it weren't for him, honestly, this podcast wouldn't be here. And I wanted to say that here because, well, it needed to be said. It really did. It's not easy to talk about Corell, especially with the other guys, because we were all friends of Corell. We knew him personally, and after someone passes away, it's not the easiest way to talk about it. And so we may mention his name from time to time, but it's hard to just talk fully about stories. And so with that, let's move on to a much more lighter note. And I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you once again. It's been an honor all these years doing this podcast with you guys. First starting out on YouTube, then moving on to Anchor. And just having more listeners come through the Anchor. And it's crazy. And it's amazing. Being able to build relationships with friends by doing this podcast, by having something that we can constantly come to and always be excited and looking forward to when we get to record and do this. So thank you again. It's been a crazy time. I also wanted to point out, because I didn't say so earlier, is that if you were wondering, if you're on Anchor, or if you're watching or listening online in some other platform, and you look at the episode list, and you're only seeing 99 episodes, the reason why you're seeing that is because the very first episode is only uploaded on YouTube. It's technically my YouTube exclusive. I've already said and explained in the other interviews why it's YouTube exclusive. So, if you're wondering why you're not seeing the first episode, just listen to our podcast that we just did. I mean, come on. I said so a couple times already. But yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to all the people who came back to interview. It was great to hear from them again. Just hear the different things that they had to say. And yeah, one last time, thank you guys so much for almost 6 years and 100 episodes. Hopefully we can just go on strong and get to the 200 or maybe the 300s. Oh my gosh, that's so long away. I don't even know if we had that much in us. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.